Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Dr. Aaron Zettner. I'm the Dean of Institutional Effectiveness and Business Instructor and CIS Instructor at Coastline College. Today, I'm going to be hosting a conversation with a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Travis Tibbets. We're going to be discussing a few questions that had come up over the semester from the supply chain students. And so, without further ado, I'm going to let Travis introduce himself.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Dr. Zentner. My name is Dr. Travis Tibbets, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. This is an honor to have an opportunity to do this, and hopefully, like Dr. Zentner said, is to make the online teaching experience more real. And so hopefully some of the stories I can share with you tonight will do just that.
Excellent.
So I started out and I got a bachelor's of science, civil engineering at the University of Arizona, um, and then joined the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan, and that's where I got my master's degree. Then years down the road, I got my doctorate in business administration and global operations and supply chain management, and that's where I met Dr. Zentner. And I have 26 plus years of experience in supply chain management. Fortunately, I did 20 really fun years in the United States Marine Corps, and during which time I was in aviation supply and logistics. Following my time in the Marine Corps, I went on to work for CACI International in Arizona, and then took a job doing cold chain logistics for a pharmaceutical company in La Jolla, California. So if you ever get a chance to look up cold chain logistics or even work in cold chain logistics, I highly recommend it. It's a specialized field and a pretty exciting field, actually. One that I wouldn't mind going back into. But after working for that job for a couple of years, I was referred to another position, a program management position with General Atomics Aeronautical Systems Incorporated in Poway, California. And that's where I still work to this day as a supply chain program manager.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Travis, for sharing that about your background. I find it interesting. Travis and I seem to just meet up directly and indirectly throughout our careers, just meeting through our doctorate programs. But then also, my dad actually works at General Atomics as well, and so they work at different locations, but it is still a small world. But to get into more of really focusing on what the students are interested in, I have a list of 4 questions, and within the 4 questions, they aren't in any particular order. So I'm just going to cherry pick them, and Dr. Tibbets can give his insight, maybe tell some good stories about it, and then we can, build that insight and that pool of knowledge with our students. So the first question is, in your experience, have you faced or how would you responded when stock ran out?
All right, so obviously you don't ever want to have a stock outage. So that's the goal. But unfortunately, there are always um, unpredicted spikes in demand. Something that the key and operative word there is unpredicted. So with the manufacturing cycle of spare parts, you have a lead time of production. And if and when you are truly experiencing a stock outage, then you are now a lead time away from having that part, and at the expense of having an aircraft sitting on the tarmac and not being ready and available for the customer's use. And that's not acceptable So um, there's um, there's a distinct advantage that General Atomics ASI has over our competitors. We actually make 85% of all of the parts that go on the Gray Eagle aircraft. That, I didn't mention that before, but that's the aircraft that I support. General Atomics ASI makes drones. Most notably would be the Predator that the Air Force flies. But my program that I support is the Gray Eagle for the Army. And so 85% of that aircraft is built in Poway, California. You'd never know it driving through the campus area because there's 30 buildings in Poway alone, and you don't see smokestacks or anything like that. You just see, big, large tilt panel construction buildings, but inside is a massive manufacturing effort going on, and it's quite amazing. But that's what we do, and if and when we do have a stock outage, the advantage that I was speaking of is that because of the fact we make 85% of those parts, we can drop an order to the floor and have our own people make those parts right there on the floor. And so it greatly shortens the lead time. If you can imagine um, having to go to one of our subcontractors, for instance, anybody that is familiar with the subcontracting process, unless you have some kind of a IDIQ contract or indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery type contract, you're going to vastly increase the amount of time it takes for you to get a part. So stock outages, you don't want to be in that position. And so as a supply chain manager, that's your job, and that's your responsibility to make sure that you don't get yourself in that position. And so we have computer models that we use. Primarily, we use the same forecasting tool that the Navy uses for their aviation supply. And it's called Opus, and it's made by a company called Systicon. And that system does a very, very good job of modeling what spares orders we need to place and when, and within budget. So it is quite an amazing forecasting tool, and we've used it with great success in the last 2 years. And fortunately, we have not had stock outages, and it's a good idea to keep a brushed up resume if you do.
Excellent, excellent. So when you've run into those situations, imagine if you were working at like an ice cream manufacturing company and you ran out of milk or cream. What do you do? Like, do you stop operations? Is it just someone talks to someone, or do you have, like you said, already set up agreements with other suppliers where you may have to run into that? Imagine if, like, in the ice cream factory, it got super hot, the ice cream all melted and went bad. In those situations, as many of us may not work in an ice cream factory, but in maybe smaller operations where we don't have these larger supply chain systems, how would you recommend a response to that situation? Is there a protocol or policy you think someone may want to develop, or other relationships? What does that look like if you want to unpeel that onion a bit?
Well, that's good. And I think this question, if you start digging into it, it kind of highlights why supply chain management has become so important in the world today. Because it used to be that the operations manager had sole responsibility for operations and supply chain. Matter of fact, they probably didn't even call it supply chain. And Um, and I think it was recognized more recently that it is important to break that off and have people that specialize in supply chain, because if you are running an ice cream shop and you are going at risk of running out of your milk or the cream that they use to make the product that you sell, you know the importance of revenue and the cost that you will experience should your suppliers not be able to deliver. So there's things that you do as a supply chain manager to make sure that you've got a little stock in depth. How many days of supply do you have in your freezer? Um, talk, you hit the nail on the head with the business relationships. How strong is that relationship? What what percentage of their market share does your ice cream shop represent to them? That tells you how important you are to them. If you're important to them, they're going to do everything they can to supply you. Um, there's a huge case study that you can study on Samsung, and there was a component in all the LCD, or there is a little component, the brain of every single LCD TV, and that brain component um, became a critical supply problem that almost crippled Samsung. If you look it up, it had to do with the business relationships that they had with that sole supplier. And anytime you have a sole supplier, that's a problem too, right? Otherwise, if you do find yourself in the ice cream shop and you have an emergency, the best thing you can do is start raiding the local grocery stores and scrambling, right? Because now you become the supplier. You're becoming the person that's reacting and having to go um, raid all the Ralphs and the Albertsons, in across town. And and so business relationships are important. The contracts you have with your supplier, very, very important. Understanding the game. Who else is your competitor in town? Are they using your supplier too? Do they have other suppliers? This may be challenging to find that information out too, but that's why you get paid as a supply chain manager. You got to find that information out.
Excellent, excellent. And so it kind of makes me think, it will go on to another question of, after COVID-19, and I think about a lot of the shortages with certain things such as foods, toilet paper, and while individuals had indicated that there were large warehouses of these supplies, the logistics to transport these supplies were very limited, and so it caused breaks in different chains because of prioritizing different ways in which you can get the raw materials to the products to the consumers. And so what do you think we've learned so far from this pandemic? Stock up on toilet paper? Good call.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those. I don't, I can tell you back in March when I was told to load up my computer and office into my car to go work from home, I really expected that 2 weeks later I'd be back in the office. I would have never I would have never guessed it would have been months later, and I'm still working from home. So um, since then, we've seen a lot of problems, major problems, that the shutdown of the economy has caused. And we haven't even felt those economic perturbations yet in this economy. And so um, that's very disconcerting to me. But um, the biggest supply chain issue that I saw that happened from COVID was suddenly with restaurants being closed down, we learned, I think one of the key things we learned is just how much of the food industry is a supplier of restaurants. You think, oh, well, grocery stores and the consumer, the residential consumers are the ones that, uh, get a lot of or the consumers of all the food. But in reality, the restaurants are a massive aspect of that. And mainly think of the suppliers of restaurants that make specialty items just for that restaurant. They're not available in grocery stores because they're restaurant grade items. And all those suppliers, suddenly now they have product that they can't sell, product that is spoiling. You think of I read stories of the farmers, the dairy farmers having to just dump, you know, hundreds and thousands of gallons of milk, meat, that was slaughtered, having to be destroyed, thrown away because it's spoiled. And so, the thing is that we want to be prepared for everything, but I don't know that I don't think anybody could have ever been prepared without foreknowledge. I will say this, that had in hindsight, maybe had we given these suppliers a heads up and say, hey, look, we're going to do this shutdown, because at the time, it hadn't spread as much yet. So had we given them, say, 2 weeks and say, hey, look, enjoy your restaurants for 2 more weeks, but we're going to shut down in 2 weeks the economy, and we're going to, shelter in place. That would have given a little bit of a chance for these suppliers to kind of get rid of their inventory and not produce any more. But when it comes to dairy cows, dairy cows have to be milked every day. If they stop getting being milked, then they stop producing milk, and they're no good to the dairy farmer. So cattle at the ranchers, they are on a timeline, and they rotate their cattle, and so the disruptions are massive. More so in some industries, less in others. But there will be, I guarantee you, there will be books written about COVID-19 shutdown for years to come.
Excellent. Thank you, Travis. And so really coming to a final question, I saw that our fourth question was kind of blended with our first question. So I wanted to go to one final question. And that question looks at, as you've worked across various industries in the military all the way to private sector, really looking at what have been the major changes in supply chain? And then in addition, what do you anticipate for the future? So it's a three-pronged question. So what are the changes you've seen? What do you find is the future of supply chain? And how are we going to prepare for that future?
Okay, that is a loaded question, but it's also a very fun one. So what's fun about it is the time we live in. Now, I will tell you, to start out in order, I have seen change from day one. So you just get used to change. If you don't like change, you're not going to like supply chain management. You're not going to like management, period, anyway. Get used to change, because change is constant. And change is mainly good all the time. And so besides, you want new and improved things, and you want to be part of that improving process. So change is good. But I've seen, right before I got into the Marine Corps in 1991, personal computers were just coming out. I remember most of you listening to this if you are probably 30 years or younger, 30 years old or younger, you may not even heard of a 386 or a 286. But the IBM computers back then were, if you had a 386 or a Pentium 486, that was like cutting edge, um, technology. Windows 3.1, a personal computer cost $3,000, and right now our smartphones, um, they just there's no comparison with the computing power in your hand compared with those old clunky 486s of that time. So I've seen supply chain change in the Marine Corps from using punch cards to getting dummy terminals that aren't really a computer. It's just a monitor that shows you what's happening at the mainframe, and using disk operating system as an interface instead of using Windows. So fast forward, as technology changed and the graphical user interface came into play with Windows, then I've seen things go to more of a Windows environment where it's very interactive and clicking with the mouse instead of having to type in commands. And just the spreadsheet alone, being able to use, I remember as a lieutenant in the Marine Corps in the early 90s, Microsoft Office had just come out, and being able to use Excel back then was I wish you could just see what Excel used to be. You still had to type in commands. They weren't all automated formulas into the cells, but at least you could do that. That was a big jump from what we were using. And so the spreadsheet alone marked a huge jump in inventory management and inventory control, because now you could take the power of the computer to manage your supply transactions so much better, so much better. So going forward, the exciting thing is that we are at a crossroads right now where the entire world is on the brink of incredible transportation changes. Not only the physical transportation, but you think about 5G and what 5G is going to bring the world. So you have a completely real-time, amazing flow of communication with 5G, and then couple that with autonomous vehicles. Well, actually, the 5G is going to enable autonomous vehicles. And so with autonomous vehicles and the speed of which we're able to move product, it's transformative in a way that is indescribable. And if you're a smart investor and do your homework, you can make yourself a lot of money over the next few decades, because this is going to change the world. The transition away from internal combustion engines that have used, fossil fuels, which, thank goodness for fossil fuels. They got us from the early or the late 1800s through the Industrial Revolution, in large part created the Industrial Revolution of the early 1900s and brought us to where we are today. But now we find we need to be transitioning away from that, right? It's a natural progression of things. And with space travel is going to become something that the normal person will be able to afford one day to just say, hey, we're going to do a vacation in space this year instead of going to space. What is it? What's that called at Disneyland? Um, Space Mountain. You know, we're going to go to space, and that's exciting stuff. And that's all going to be transformative of the supply chain. Think of Amazon with delivery of drones, delivery of your packages by delivery of drones, using a drone to drop your package off at your door. That's mind blowing. That is crazy. And that's happening. That's like old technology, you know. They haven't really, I mean, there's FAA problems and that type of stuff, but it's the future. It really is the future. And all that is going to play a role in how supply chains transform in the future, right? Because everything needs to be faster. Um, that means the faster you ship stuff, the faster your inventory is moving. Now, can you imagine trying to keep track of such a fast moving inventory? Um, it's really going to be exciting, and um, I look forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. No, thank you, Travis. Thank you, Dr. Tibbetts, for your perspective on things. I do think the future is going to provide us a lot more opportunities. I do look forward to, I have a car that is autonomous. And so I do look forward to that actually going full drive by itself where I can take a nap. and, but honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head to say between that artificial intelligence and machine learning, as we see these systems becoming systems that can learn from themselves, develop their own algorithms, and then just become better, everything is going to increase levels of efficiency and meet what I really call is something of social expectation of instant gratification. As you've seen in the past, where when we go shopping on Amazon, like if we're at the store, we're just like, this is not here, I'll have it by Amazon. Either if it's like Amazon Fresh, I'll have it in a few hours, or Amazon Now, or oh, what do you mean it's 2-day shipping? And it's almost an expectation that shipping is free, and where does that operational expense go, that cost go? And so suppliers such as Amazon and other large retailers like Walmart are starting to identify those niches that it's no longer like, oh, that's a great thing to have. It's now an expectation. And so as a supply chain manager, how do we meet those expectations with the ebbs and flows of supply and demand? And I think, like I said, that'll be an exciting turn of events as we move into those new eras. So like I said, before we go, are there any other final thoughts you would like to give our students who are going into the field of supply chain? Any words of wisdom that you would share with them?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So, really, I mean, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of reading the material, but truly studying is an adventure you're going to never stop doing. You need to continue. But while you're in these courses, um, try to pick up on the best you can on these concepts, because you will use these concepts, whether or not they actually um, are used explicitly in a task that you're doing, or just in the back of your head, you recall back to that time that you studied lean or any of those principles that you would want to be able to reach back to, because they are valuable and they help you in so many ways. It's challenging because the time or the length of these courses is short, and you have to get a lot of information quickly. But I cannot um, implore you enough. Really take this stuff seriously. It's going to benefit you greatly in the future.
Excellent. And I second what you say as well, Dr. Tibbetts. I think for me also, when going into your courses, putting yourself in those roles, in those situations, and planning ahead. I think a key component of being a supply chain or any type of a manager is to have a scenario plan of X, Y, and Z would occur, and not to react on emotion, to really think things through logically. Now, while I would love to say that every answer you can find is in a textbook, unfortunately, the operational world we work in today, it doesn't work as well as we would anticipate that way. However, these principles that you'll be learning in your classes will help guide the decisions you make, will help you better understand from others' decisions. And like I said, every situation will always be different. I wish it was textbook where you could go. I wish like we could say, yes, all you have to do is press this button and the problem would be solved. So once again, focusing not just in our subject matter areas, but what you can gain from the other courses you take in your college, academic, or career education pathway. I think all the courses work together to help build those skills within critical thinking, communication, and really technical analysis, where you'll find will be key components in the success of your career. So thank you again, Dr. Tibbetts, and we'll have to do this again soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Definitely have a great day.
You too.